The crystal champagne glass chimed sharply as I tapped it with my salad fork. The sound cut through the murmuring crowd in the private dining room of Le Monarque, Chicago's most expensive French restaurant. It was the rehearsal dinner. My son, Mark, looked handsome in his tuxedo, beaming with the kind of innocent joy that terrified me. Next to him sat his fiancée, Tiffany. She was wearing a white dress that probably cost more than my first Cadillac. She smiled at the guests, but when I stood up, her eyes flickered. It was a small movement, a quick dart to the left, then down to her purse, then back to me. To anyone else, it was just nerves. To me, it was a tell. It was the involuntary reflex of a card counter when the pit boss walks up behind them. It was the look of a cheat who knows the jig is up. "To the happy couple," I said, holding my glass up. My voice was steady, the practiced baritone of a man who used to throw drunk whales out of the high-limit room without spilling a drop of their drink. "Marriage is a gamble. That's what they say, right?" The guests chuckled politely. Tiffany's smile tightened. She gripped Mark's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "But in Vegas," I continued, staring directly at her, "we don't rely on luck. We rely on the odds. We check the deck. We watch the hands. And sometimes we find a card up a sleeve." I reached into my tuxedo pocket. Tiffany froze. She thought I was pulling out a check, the final installment of the $100,000 she had demanded for this circus. I wasn't holding a check. I was holding a folded piece of paper with a Nevada state seal on it. "I have a gift for the bride," I said, placing the paper on the table. "I think you dropped this in Reno." Before I tell you exactly what was on that paper and why Tiffany knocked over her chair trying to grab it before Mark could read it, you need to understand the hand I was dealt. You need to know how a retired casino boss spotted a hustle in his own living room when his own son was too blinded by love to see the cards. If you hate gold diggers and love watching the house take it all back, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel. Let's deal the cards. My name is Jack Roth. In the industry, they call me Ace. I spent 40 years working the floors of the biggest casinos in Las Vegas. I started as a dealer, worked my way up to pit boss, and retired as the floor manager of one of the Strip's crown jewels. I wasn't the guy who booked the shows or poured the drinks. I was the guy who watched. I have a talent. Some call it a gift. My ex-wives called it a curse. I see things. I notice the micro-expressions people make when they're lying. I notice when a player's pulse flutters in their neck. I can count a 6-deck shoe in my head while ordering a sandwich. In my world, everyone is running a game. The player wants to beat the house. The dealer wants to skim chips. My job was to make sure the house always won. I retired to Chicago 5 years ago to be closer to my son. Mark is the best thing I ever produced, but he is not like me. He's a high school English teacher. He sees the good in everyone. He trusts people. He thinks the world is a romance novel. I tried to teach him to cut the cards, but he preferred poetry. So when he called me 6 months ago and said he had met the one, I was happy for him. Cautious, but happy. Then I met her. Mark brought Tiffany to my penthouse for dinner. She walked in wearing Louboutins and enough diamonds to light up a slot machine. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. Blonde, polished, poised. She hugged me and I smelled 2 things, expensive perfume and ambition. "It's so nice to meet you, Jack," she flashed a dazzling smile. "Mark tells me you used to run Vegas. That sounds so exciting." "It was a job," I said, shaking her hand. Her palm was damp, cold and clammy, nervous. "Tiffany is a life coach," Mark announced proudly, pouring wine. "She helps people manifest their abundance." "Manifest abundance," I repeated. "That sounds profitable." "It is," she said, sipping her wine. "I have clients all over the world. Dubai, London, Monaco." I watched her over the rim of my glass. When she said Dubai, her eyes blinked rapidly.
When she said Monaco, she touched the heavy gold chain around her neck. Tells. She was lying. She had never been to Monaco in her life. She was reciting a script. Over the next few months, the hustle escalated. She moved into Mark's apartment within weeks. She convinced him to upgrade his car. She started talking about their future, specifically my role in it. "We want a big wedding, Dad. Tiffany has always dreamed of a fairy tale. But teacher's salary, you know." "How much?" I asked. $100,000, Mark said, wincing slightly. "I know it's a lot." I looked at Tiffany. She was looking at her phone, pretending not to listen, but her foot was tapping rhythmically against the chair leg, counting the seconds. "I'll pay for it," I said, smiling my best casino smile, the one that says, "Try me." "But I handle the invoices. I pay the vendors directly. No cash handouts." Tiffany looked up. "Oh, Jack, that's so generous. But my planner has specific vendors she works with. They require deposits up front. It might be easier if you just wrote us a check." "I don't mind writing checks to vendors," I said sweetly. "I like to know who I'm doing business with." She didn't like that. I saw the flash of irritation in her jaw muscle, but she smoothed it over. "Of course," she said sweetly. "I'll send you the bills." The first bill arrived last week. It was for the flowers. Orchid Dreams floral design. The total was $15,000. I looked at the invoice. It was just a PDF. No tax ID, no address other than a P.O. box in a strip mall on the south side. 15 grand for flowers. I've comped High Royal Suites for less. Something didn't sit right. My gut, which had saved my casino millions over the years, was screaming. So I did what I always do. I checked the player's background. I didn't pay the bill. I grabbed my car keys and drove to the address listed on the invoice. I wanted to see these Orchid Dreams for myself. If I had just paid it, maybe things would have gone differently. Maybe she would have gotten lazy and slipped up later. But finding out what was really behind the door of that flower shop pulled the thread that unraveled her entire sweater.
I expected a shop full of roses. What I found was a storefront with bars on the windows and a neon sign that said, "We buy gold." I parked my Cadillac in front of the run-down storefront on the south side. The neon sign buzzed ominously in the window. Checks cashed, title loans, no questions. The address matched the invoice for the $15,000 worth of orchids perfectly. Suite B was taped to a rusty mailbox. I walked up to the bulletproof glass window. A guy with a neck tattoo was counting a stack of dirty bills. He didn't look up. "Can I help you, Pops?" he asked, snapping a rubber band around the cash. "I'm looking for Orchid Dreams floral design," I said, sliding the printed invoice under the slot. "I have a question about a wedding order." The clerk looked at the paper. Then he looked at me. He burst out laughing. It was a dry, hacking sound. "Orchid Dreams?" he wheezed. "Buddy, you're looking for a bouquet? Go to Jewel Osco. We cash checks here. We act as a registered agent for LLCs sometimes, but I ain't never seen a flower in this joint unless it was printed on a stripper's leg." I pulled the invoice back. "So this company exists only on paper?" "It exists where the money goes," the clerk shrugged, losing interest. "You want a title loan or not?" I walked back to my car. It was exactly what I suspected, a shell company. Tiffany, or whatever her real name was, wasn't planning a wedding. She was laundering the budget. She created fake invoices for fake vendors, sent them to me, and when I wrote the check, she would cash it here, probably paying the clerk a small fee to look the other way. If I wrote checks for the venue, the catering, and the band, she would siphon off close to 100 grand before the big day, and then she would vanish. Mark would be left standing at the altar with a broken heart and an empty bank account.
I needed more than just a fake address. I needed to know who she was working with. You don't run a hustle like this alone. You need a partner to handle the back end. I pulled out my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 3 years. "Sly," I said when the line clicked open. "I need the eye." Sylvester Silvestri was a legend in Vegas surveillance. He sat in the eye in the sky rooms for 30 years. He could spot a card counter by the way they breathed. He retired to Chicago around the same time I did because he said he missed the pizza.
We met an hour later at a dive bar near Midway Airport. Sly sat in the back booth, a manila envelope already on the table. He was 70, bald and wore thick glasses, but he still looked at everyone who walked in the door like they were holding a weapon. "You were right, Jack," Sly said, keeping his voice low. "She's good, but nobody is invisible." "What did you find?" I asked, signaling the waitress for a coffee. "I ran her face," Sly said. "I still have access to the Griffin book, the casino blacklist database. Your future daughter-in-law isn't named Tiffany. Her name is Candace Miller, and she isn't a life coach." He slid a mug shot across the table. It was 5 years old, but it was definitely her. Her hair was darker and she looked rougher, but the eyes were the same, cold, calculating. "Arrested in Reno for passing bad checks, banned from the Wynn for chip walking. She's a grifter, Jack, a pro." "Does Mark know?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Mark thinks she's an angel," Sly snorted. "But here's the kicker. She has an accomplice. She never works alone." Sly pulled out a second photo. It was a surveillance shot from a casino floor. Candace, Tiffany, was standing at a craps table, high-fiving a man. The man was tall, dark-haired, with a scar on his chin. "Recognize him?" Sly asked. I stared at the photo. The man looked familiar. I had seen him last Sunday at my house for the engagement BBQ. "That's Vinny," I said, my blood running cold. "His cousin. She said he was a sommelier from Napa." "His name is Vincent Moretti. He's not a cousin. He's a con artist from Jersey. And Jack, he's not just her partner." Sly laid a document on the table. It was a certified copy of a marriage license from Clark County, Nevada, dated 3 years ago. "This is Candace and Vincent's marriage certificate," Sly said, tapping the seal. "There is no record of a divorce. She is still legally married to her cousin." I sat back in the booth. "Bigamy." "Stop. You need to understand the level of disrespect here. She brought her husband into my house. She introduced him to my son. She made Mark shake the hand of the man she was sleeping with. They were laughing at us. They were eating my steak, drinking my wine, and planning how to strip my son for parts right in front of my face. It wasn't just a con. It was a humiliation." "They're planning to cash out," I said, thinking of the fake florist invoice. "She gets the wedding checks, they cash them, and they disappear before the ceremony. Or worse, she goes through with it. She marries Mark, commits bigamy, then divorces him 6 months later for a settlement. Illinois is a no-fault state, so if she marries him, she gets half the assets acquired during the marriage, but since the marriage would be void due to bigamy, she gets nothing, if we prove it. We need to prove it before she hurts him." "They're getting sloppy," Sly said. "I tracked her phone ping. She and Vinny are meeting at a hotel downtown this afternoon, room 412. Probably to split the loot from the other vendors she billed you for." I looked at the photos. I looked at the marriage license. "Thanks, Sly," I said, standing up. "Keep digging. I need everything." "Where are you going?" Sly asked. "I'm going to pay a visit to room 412. I want to hear what they say when they think the marks aren't listening." I drove downtown. The traffic was heavy, giving me time to think. Mark was so happy. He was picking out tuxedos. If I told him right now, he wouldn't believe me. He would say I was jealous. He would say I was investigating her because I was a paranoid old casino boss who couldn't trust anyone. Tiffany had already laid the groundwork, making jokes about my suspicious nature.
If I accused her without catching her red-handed, she would spin it. She'd claim Vinny was an abusive ex she was trying to escape. She'd play the victim. Mark would take her side. I needed indisputable proof. I needed a confession. I parked in the hotel garage. I didn't go to the front desk. I took the service elevator. I walked down the hall to room 412. I stood outside the door. It wasn't soundproof. I could hear voices, laughter. I didn't knock. I leaned in, pressing my ear against the wood. In the casino, you learn to filter out the noise of the slot machines to hear the whisper of a cheat. "He wrote the check for the venue?" It was Vinny's voice. "Not yet," Candace answered. "He's stubborn. The old man is sniffing around. He asked about the flower invoice." "Maybe we should rush it," Vinny suggested. "Tell him your mom is sick. Move the wedding up. Make him panic." "That's the plan," she said. "I'll tell Mark tonight. We push for a courthouse wedding next week to make Mom happy. Jack will have to cut the checks immediately. And then, she laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "We cash them, we hop a flight to Cabo, and we leave the teacher standing at the altar with his poems." I recorded every word on my phone. It was enough for me, but I knew it wouldn't be enough for Mark. A recording can be out of context. He needed to see it. He needed to see who she really was. I walked away from the door. I had the ammunition. Now I just needed the right venue for the execution. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow night, but Tiffany moved faster than I expected. She didn't wait for the courthouse idea. She went on the offensive. When I got home that evening, Mark was waiting in my lobby. He looked furious. He was red-faced, pacing back and forth. "Mark?" I asked, walking toward him. "Stay away from her," Mark shouted, pointing a finger in my face. "What?" "Tiffany called me," Mark's voice broke. "She was crying. She said she came over here today to drop off samples, and you tried to touch her." I froze. "Mark, that's a lie. I wasn't even here." "She said you threatened her," Mark yelled, attracting the attention of the concierge. "She said you told her if she didn't leave me, you'd cut me off, and then you grabbed her." She had played the ultimate card. She accused me of assault to isolate the target. "Mark, listen to me," I said calmly. "She's lying. She's a grifter. Her name is Candace." "You're crazy," Mark shoved me. "You're just a bitter, lonely old casino boss who hates seeing anyone else happy. You're not coming to the wedding. You're dead to me." He stormed out. I stood there in the lobby of my building. My own son had just disowned me. She had won. She had cut me out of the picture so she could finish the job. But the house always has an advantage. We know when to double down. Mark disinvited me. That meant he didn't expect me to be there tomorrow night, which meant Tiffany would be relaxed. She would be confident. I took out my phone. I texted Sly. "Game on. Bring the big printer. We're going to a dinner party." The 24 hours before the rehearsal dinner passed in a blur of cold efficiency. I didn't try to call Mark again. He blocked my number anyway. I didn't try to go to the apartment. I knew Tiffany or Candace would have changed the locks or convinced Mark to file a restraining order. She was winning the information war. She controlled the narrative, painting me as a predator and herself as the fragile victim. To beat a cheater, you can't just tell the truth. You have to show the cards. I met Sly in the back of his surveillance van parked 3 blocks from Le Monarque at 6:30 p.m. on Friday. The dinner was scheduled for 7. Sly had been busy. He handed me a tablet connected to the restaurant's audio-visual system. I called in a favor with the maitre d'. He patched our feed into the main projector. When you give the signal, I override the love story montage they prepared. "Good," I said, adjusting my bow tie in the rearview mirror. "What about the document?" Sly handed me a high-resolution, certified copy of the Nevada marriage license. He also handed me a thumb drive containing the audio recording from the hotel room.
"You realize this is nuclear, Jack," Sly warned me, looking at me over his glasses. "If you do this publicly, Mark is going to be humiliated. He might forgive her eventually if you just told him privately, but embarrassing him in front of 50 people, that leaves a scar. If I tell him privately, she spins it. She tells me I forged the papers. She tells me the audio is AI. She isolates him further. I need to break the spell, and the only way to break a spell is with a sledgehammer." "It's your call, Ace," Sly shrugged. "I'll be listening on the earpiece. Say the word Monaco, and I hit play."
I walked the 3 blocks to the restaurant. It was a humid Chicago night. The neon signs reflected in the puddles on the sidewalk, reminding me of the old days on the Strip. I wasn't walking like a father going to celebrate his son. I was walking like a pit boss going to confront a card counter. I entered Le Monarque through the main doors. The private event room was at the back, behind heavy velvet curtains. I could hear laughter and clinking glasses inside. I paused at the curtain. I took a breath. This was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Facing a cartel member with a gun is easy. Facing your own son who hates you is torture. I pushed the curtain aside and stepped in. The room went silent almost instantly. It started at the tables near the door and rippled forward like a wave. Conversations died mid-sentence. Mark was standing near the head table, holding a glass of champagne. When he saw me, his face drained of color, then flushed a deep, angry crimson. Tiffany sat next to him. She didn't look angry. She looked terrified. She dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. Sitting on her other side was Cousin Vinny, Vincent Moretti, her actual husband. He looked up, his eyes narrowing. He started to stand up, his hand going to his jacket pocket instinctively. Old habits from Jersey die hard. "What are you doing here?" Mark demanded, his voice shaking. The guests whispered. They sensed the violence in the air. "It's a party, isn't it?" I said, walking slowly toward the center of the room. I kept my hands visible, palms open. "I paid the deposit for the venue, Mark. I figured I was entitled to a crab cake." "You were uninvited," Mark spat, stepping in front of Tiffany as if to shield her. "After what you did, after you threatened her? Get out, Jack. I'm calling the police." Tiffany buried her face in her hands, letting out a perfectly timed sob. "Please," she whimpered, "just make him leave. He's obsessed with me." "I'm not obsessed, Candace," I said, using her real name. She flinched. Mark didn't catch it, but Vinny did. Vinny moved around the table, putting himself between me and the couple. He was big, burly, and trying very hard to look like a protective relative. "You heard the groom," Vinny growled, puffing out his chest. "Beat it, old man, before I throw you out." "Sit down, Vinny," I said calmly, "unless you want me to ask about the warrant in Atlantic City for counterfeit chips." Vinny froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. I walked past him. He didn't touch me. He knew that I knew. I stopped 10 feet from the head table. I looked at Mark. He looked so much like his mother in that moment, stubborn, hurt, and blindly loyal. "Mark," I said softly, "I know you think I'm the villain here. I know you think I'm trying to ruin your happiness, but I promised your mother I would never let you be played." "The only one playing games is you," Mark shouted. "You can't stand that I don't need you anymore. You can't stand that she loves me." "Does she?" I asked. I looked at Tiffany. "Do you love him, Tiffany, or do you love the idea of a $100,000 wedding and a quick divorce settlement?" "Stop it!" Tiffany shrieked, standing up. "He's ruining our night. Mark, do something." Mark grabbed a steak knife from the table. It was a defensive gesture, not an attack, but it showed how desperate he was. "Get out!" I looked at the crowd. 50 friends and family. My sister was there, my old neighbors. They looked horrified. They thought I was having a mental breakdown. "I'm leaving," I lied. "But first, I want to propose a toast." I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing waiter's tray. I raised it high. "To the happy couple," I boomed, my voice finding the command frequency I used on the casino floor. "Marriage is a sacred bond, a contract, a commitment.
Mark lowered the knife, confused by the shift in tone. "But in Vegas," I continued, eyeing Tiffany, "we have a rule. One hand at a time. You can't play 2 tables at once. It's against the gaming regulations." Tiffany's eyes widened. She knew what was coming. She grabbed her purse, looking for an exit. "Jack, don't," Vinny warned, stepping forward. "Sly," I touched my ear. "Monaco." The lights in the room dimmed. The projector screen behind the head table descended. Mark turned around, expecting the slideshow of their vacation photos he had prepared. Instead, the screen filled with a scanned document. It was blown up to 4 feet high. It was undeniable. State of Nevada, certificate of marriage. Groom, Vincent Moretti. Bride, Candace Tiffany Miller. Date, October 14th, 2019. Status, active. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. My sister dropped her glass. "What is that?" Mark whispered, staring at the screen. He read the names. He looked at Vinny. He looked at Tiffany. "It's a fake!" Tiffany screamed, knocking over her chair. "He photoshopped it. It's not real." "It's a certified copy, Mark. I pulled it from the Clark County clerk yesterday. Your fiancée isn't just a grifter. She's a bigamist. She's still married to her cousin Vinny." Mark turned to Vinny, the man who had slapped him on the back, the man who had toasted him. "You're married to her?" Mark asked, his voice trembling. "It's a lie, kid," Vinny said, sweating. "Paperwork error. We divorced years ago." "Really?" I asked. "Then why did you say this in room 411 yesterday afternoon?" The speakers crackled. The audio filled the room. It wasn't the wedding song. "We push for a courthouse wedding next week. Jack will have to cut the checks immediately. We cash them, we hop a flight to Cabo, and we leave the teacher standing at the altar with his poems." Tiffany's laughter, cruel, mocking, unmistakably hers, echoed off the walls. Mark stood frozen. The color drained from his face until he looked like a wax statue. He looked at the woman he loved. He waited for her to deny it. He waited for her to explain. But Tiffany didn't deny it. She stopped crying. The mask of the victim vanished, replaced by the hard, ugly sneer of the casino hustler I recognized from the mugshot. "Turn it off," she snarled at me. "I think he's heard enough," I said. Mark turned to her. He didn't shout. He just asked one question. Was any of it real? Even a little bit? Tiffany looked at him. She looked at his cheap teacher's watch. She rolled her eyes. "Grow up, Mark," she said coldly. "Nobody's that nice for free." It was the final dagger. Mark flinched as if he'd been physically struck. "Grab the purse, Vinny," Tiffany barked, grabbing a bottle of champagne from the table. "We're leaving." "Not yet," I said. I looked toward the kitchen doors. "You can bring the check now." The double doors to the kitchen swung open. It wasn't a waiter with the check. It was Detective Rossi and 2 uniformed officers from the CPD Financial Crimes Unit. Sly had timed it perfectly. Rossi walked in calmly, his badge gleaming under the crystal chandelier. He stopped in front of Vinny, who looked like he was calculating the distance to the fire exit. "Vincent Moretti," Detective Rossi announced, his voice filling the stunned silence. "And Candace Miller. Put your hands on the table where I can see them." Vinny hesitated. His eyes darted to a steak knife. I saw the muscle in his shoulder bunch. "Don't do it, Vinny," I warned from across the room. "The odds on fighting 3 armed officers are terrible. Even a drunk tourist wouldn't take that bet." Vinny sighed, defeated. He slumped his shoulders and placed his heavy hands on the white tablecloth. An officer moved in, pulling his arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked, a sharp mechanical sound that signaled the end of the game. Tiffany, Candace, didn't surrender as gracefully. As the female officer approached her, she panicked. She snatched the expensive champagne bottle she was holding and swung it wildly. It wasn't an attack, it was a distraction. She threw the bottle at the officer and bolted for the velvet curtains. "She's a runner," Rossi shouted. Mark didn't move. He stood there like a statue, watching the woman he intended to marry sprint in her Louboutins toward the door. But she didn't make it far. The heavy curtains tangled around her legs. She tripped, crashing into a table of hors d'oeuvres. A platter of shrimp cocktail went flying.
She landed in a heap on the floor, screaming profanities that would make a dock worker blush. "Get off me," she screeched as the officer pinned her. "My dress! You're ruining my dress! Do you know how much this cost?" It cost Jack Roth $15,000, along with the fake flowers, the fake venue deposit, and the catering for a wedding that was never going to happen. You're under arrest for grand larceny, wire fraud, and bigamy.
They dragged her past the head table. She locked eyes with Mark. For a second, I thought she might apologize. I thought she might show a shred of humanity. "You're pathetic, Mark," she spat, her mascara running down her cheeks. "You were boring. The sex was boring. And your dad is a dinosaur. I should have cleaned you out months ago." Mark flinched, but he didn't look away. He stared at her until the officers pushed her out the door. The venom in her voice hung in the air long after she was gone. The room exhaled. The tension broke into 1,000 whispered conversations. My sister rushed over to Mark, hugging him. He stood stiffly in her arms, looking at the empty space where his fiancée had been sitting. I walked over to the table. I picked up the engagement ring she had dropped during the struggle. It was a 3-carat solitaire. I had given Mark the money for it. "Mark?" I asked softly. He looked at me. His eyes were red, but dry. The shock was starting to fade, replaced by a deep, aching hollow. "She was married," Mark whispered, "the whole time. She kissed me goodbye this morning, and she was married to Vinny." "She was playing a role, son," I said. "Some people are just actors looking for a stage." "And the vendors?" Mark asked. "The florist? The photographer?" "All shell companies," I explained, "owned by Vinny. Every check you asked me to write went straight into their offshore account. If the wedding had happened tomorrow, they would have cashed the last big check and disappeared during the reception." Mark sat down heavily on a chair. He put his head in his hands. "I feel so stupid. How did I not see it? I teach Othello. I teach literature about betrayal. How was I so blind?" "Because you have a good heart," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Cheats prey on good hearts. They rely on the fact that you wouldn't lie, so you assume they aren't lying either." Detective Rossi walked over, tucking his notebook into his pocket. "We have them dead to rights, Jack," Rossi said. "Sly sent over the packet, the fake business licenses, the marriage certificate, the wire transfers. We seized Vinny's laptop in the van. It has the spreadsheet of their other victims. 3 guys in Miami, 2 in Dallas. You stopped a crime spree, Ace." "Good," I nodded. "Make sure the charges stick." "They will," Rossi promised. "Bigamy is a felony, but the wire fraud carries 20 years. They're not going to Cabo, they're going to Joliet." The guests were starting to leave, awkwardly filing out, mumbling condolences to Mark. It was the saddest party I had ever hosted. But as the room cleared, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I had lost the money for the party, I had lost the deposit, but I had saved my son's future. "Come on," I said to Mark. "Let's go." "Go where?" Mark asked, looking around the ruin of the dinner. "To get a real drink," I said. "This champagne is flat." We walked out of the restaurant into the cool Chicago night. The valet brought my car around. Mark stopped on the sidewalk. He looked at me. He looked ashamed. "Dad," I started, his voice cracking. I told you you were dead to me. I accused you of assault." "I know," I said. "She played you, Mark. She isolated the mark. That's page 1 of the Grifter Handbook." "I should have trusted you. You saw it from day 1, didn't you?" "I saw the tell," I admitted, "when she lied about Monaco. But Mark, you saw the good in her, because that's who you are. Don't let her take that from you. Don't let her turn you into a cynic like me." Mark managed a weak smile. "I think I'll be cynical for a little while at least." "That's healthy," I agreed. "Get in the car." We drove back to my penthouse. We didn't talk much. We just sat on the balcony, drinking a bottle of expensive scotch I had been saving for his wedding day. It felt appropriate to open it now.
We were celebrating a narrow escape. Sly came over an hour later, carrying a pizza box. "Did you see her face?" Sly laughed, grabbing a slice. "When the audio played? Priceless. I should have projected it on the Sears Tower." "You did good, Sly," I said. "She called me a dinosaur," I mused, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. "A dinosaur with big teeth," Mark added quietly. He looked at me. "Thanks, Dad, for not listening to me, for saving me." "Always," I said. "I'm the house, kid. I protect the bank." I looked out at the city lights. Tiffany, Candace, was in a holding cell tonight. Vinny was in another. The game was over. I counted the cards, tracked the shuffle, and called the bluff. It cost me some money, sure, but looking at my son, safe and free from a predator who would have destroyed his life, that was the biggest jackpot I ever won. But there is one final lesson here, one thing you need to know about cheaters. They always think they're the smartest person in the room until the security guard taps them on the shoulder. They forget that luck runs out, but math is forever. I'm Jack Roth. I'm 68 years old, and I'm still the pit boss. This is John Vengeance. If you loved seeing a scammer get busted flush, hit that like button. Share this story with anyone who is rushing into a wedding with someone they barely know. Always cut the deck, always check the background, and remember, the house always wins. The legal proceedings moved slower than a blackjack dealer with arthritis, but the outcome was never in doubt. With the audio recordings, the Nevada marriage certificate, and the sheer volume of fraudulent invoices found on Vinny's laptop, the DA didn't even have to offer a plea deal. They went for the maximum. It turns out Tiffany, Candace, and Vincent Moretti had run this scam 3 times before. In Miami, they took an orthopedic surgeon for $200,000. In Dallas, they got a condo out of a retired pilot. But in Chicago, they ran into a casino boss. That was their bad luck. Candace was sentenced to 7 years in state prison for identity theft, fraud, and bigamy. Vinny got 10 years because of his prior warrants in New Jersey. The last I heard, Candace is working in the prison library, probably trying to hustle extra commissary items from the other inmates. Old habits don't die, they just change venues. As for the money, I recovered about 80% of the vendor deposits. The florist and the caterer were just bank accounts owned by Vinny, and the court froze them immediately. I lost about 20 grand in non-refundable legal fees and private investigation costs, but I chalked that up as the cost of education. In Vegas, we call it tuition. You pay to learn the game. Mark took some time off from teaching. He spent the summer traveling by himself. He needed to clear his head. He needed to learn who he was without a partner defining him. He sent me postcards from hiking trails in Colorado and coffee shops in Seattle. He looked happier in the photos, lighter. He came back last week. We had dinner at a steakhouse, not Le Monarque. We're done with French food for a while. Mark pulled a manuscript out of his bag. "Dad, I started writing again," Mark said, tapping the stack of paper. "It's a crime novel about a woman with 2 husbands and a diamond drill." "Sounds familiar," I laughed, cutting my ribeye. "Does the hero save the day?" "No," Mark smiled. "The hero's dad saves the day. The hero just learns to listen." I felt a lump in my throat. We're good now, better than we've been in years. The secret didn't divide us. Exposing it brought us back to the same side of the table. Sly and I still meet for drinks on Tuesdays. He frames the newspaper clipping of Candace's sentencing on his wall next to his old gaming license. "Best bust of my career," he claims, and I didn't even have to call security. Life is settled back into a rhythm. I check my stocks, I watch the birds from my balcony, but I kept one souvenir from the ordeal. On my desk, right next to the picture of Mark, sits a singular playing card, the Queen of Hearts. I keep it there as a reminder. Even the prettiest face in the deck can beat you if you don't watch the shuffle. They say you can't cheat an honest man. I don't know if that's true.
I think honest men are the easiest to cheat because they project their own morality onto others. They expect the game to be fair. But the game is not fair. The world is full of people looking for an edge, looking for a mark, looking for a shortcut to the high-limit room. It's not cynical to cut the deck. It's necessary. You protect what you built. You protect who you love. And you never, ever take your eyes off the hands. I'm Jack Ace Roth. I'm 69 years old, and I'm officially retired from the surveillance business. But the eye in the sky never really closes.
This is John Vengeance. Thank you for sitting at my table tonight. If you're glad that Mark walked away free and the grifters walked into a cell, toss a chip on that like button and subscribe. Share this story with anyone who is wearing rose-colored glasses. Sometimes you need to take them off to see the red flags. Stay sharp, trust the odds, and always, always read the fine print.